Hey Dungeoneers, Luke here, and welcome to the 2018 Black Desert Class Guide. Alright, now because this is a beginner's guide, there is one thing I'm going to have to get out of the way first. You are going to come across hundreds upon hundreds of posts on Reddit and on the forums arguing about which class is the best. Well, don't worry guys, I am going to tell you right now which is the best class in the game. The best class in the game is the one that you have the most fun playing. Now I know that's what you don't want to hear. I know you're sick of hearing, just do it for fun, don't try and be competitive, but listen to me guys. This is a Korean MMO, a grindy Korean MMO. You are going to be spending hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours grinding on a single character. If you pick a class that you don't like just because somebody on the forum said it was better, you are going to get burned out and hate the game a lot quicker than if you pick a class that you enjoy. Every single class in this game is viable for endgame, either PvP or PvE, so there is no best class in the game. Now with that being said, certain classes are better at different things, which is why I am here. So strap in, get ready, and we're gonna go through every class one at a time. There's going to be no arbitrary graphs or star rating systems. I'm going to give you the down and dirty on what all the classes do, give you a little bit of a rundown of what you can expect playing them, and maybe you'll find that main of yours. Alright, so first class on our list is going to be the Warrior. The Warrior starts off with a sword and shield, and then once awakened uses a two-handed greatsword. Now the Warrior is pretty well known in Black Desert for having some amazing self-sustain. This dude has loads and loads of health stealing abilities and just basically never needs potions while you're going side to side. Now unfortunately, he is not one of the best grinders in the game. He does deal really good damage and a really nice AoE, but unfortunately the cooldowns on it are a little too long for him to be really efficient. And on top of that, he doesn't have a lot of great mobility skills to get from pack to pack. Now, I'm not saying he's a terrible grinder, he's just definitely a little bit farther behind. However, where the Warrior excels, it is in his 1v1 PvP and group PvP scenarios. Seriously guys, even if you're grinding slow as hell, if somebody comes up and tries to contest your pack, you can just grind them into the floor and then go about your merry way. Good warriors in PvP are damn near unbeatable when it comes to their amazing combos, high damage, and you just cannot get away from these guys. Now, granted, there is one thing I would want to know while starting Warrior, which is he does have a buff that you pretty much are required to activate every, 4 to 5 seconds in order to keep your damage at top priority. It's not necessarily the biggest deal for a lot of people, but I know going into it, it is something you may want to know. However, it's not the hardest thing to activate. You just got to remember to stay on top of it, and you can go and murder the people who are trying to steal your mobs. Next on the list, guys, we are going to talk about the Valkyrie. Now, at the first look from a new player, the Valkyrie may just seem like a female version of the Warrior. And while that strikes you as a little bit true throughout the first couple levels, once you get farther into it, you realize just how wrong you are. While the Valkyrie starts off with a sword and shield the same way the Warrior does, she actually transforms into using a lance and great shield once awakened. Now, while the Great Shield will give you some fantastic defensive stats and abilities, this lance deals crazy AoE damage, guys. The Valkyrie, once geared, is pretty much the highest damage character in the entire game. She's absolutely nutty once you get that gear. She's actually one of the few classes in this game that truly scales, because once you start with her, she kind of starts off mediocre. She doesn't have the best grind, she doesn't have the best mobility, she doesn't have the best stats, but once you get that gear, when it is true endgame, a fully geared Valkyrie is a force to behold. I have seen a Valkyrie wipe out a pack of 15 opponents with one ability in PvP. She's completely nutty, guys. If you're looking for a class that, is sort of like a chili, you throw all the ingredients in, cook it for 10 minutes, it's not going to end up that well. But if you take the time to really slowly simmer it and build it up from the ground up, you will end up with something absolutely amazing. Alright, next up we're going to be talking about the Ranger. Now the Ranger is interesting because while she starts off as a ranged DPS character, she actually becomes a melee ranged hybrid once she awakens. She uses a regular bow in her unawakened form, but quickly switches into a sword and wind magic combination once awakened. It sounds kind of weird, but it actually ends up working together fairly well. She has really good AoE and single target damage while grinding, and while she is fairly decent at PvP, you do have to be very good at her because of how squishy she is. If anybody gets on you like a Berserker or a Warrior or a Ninja, you are probably going to die. It's just straight up, guys. She is so squishy, but she can really deal out the damage. Now, do note that she does actually become melee after awakening, guys. Her sword does crazy amounts of damage. She has really good AoE with it, but a lot of people go into a ranger class expecting to stay as a ranger. Now, you can obviously stay in ranged form if you prefer, but if you really want to get the most out of the character, you're going to have to be switching back and forth. One last thing, guys, the Ranger is probably the thirstiest potion drinker in the game while grinding. There are a couple things you can do to offset it, like extraction gems and stuff like that, but for the most part, guys, you are going to be chugging potions while you're grinding on this class. If that's not a deal breaker for you, maybe give her a try and see if you like it, but you should definitely know, it's not something to be ignored. The potions on this class are like a fund all of themselves. While you're budgeting your weapons and armor and stuff, you have to have a potion budget. I'm just letting you know now. But honestly, guys, if you have the funding for her and you're willing to put in the time to learn all her combos, she is an absolutely fantastic class. Plus, she has thigh physics. Alright, next up we're going to be talking about the Sorceress. The Sorceress starts off as a medium-ranged mage and then can switch into a melee AoE powerhouse. She is very hard to play if you have never played a class like it before. She is one of the few classes in the game where you are going to be constantly switching back and forth between your melee form and your ranged form, sort of like the Ranger before this. The main reason for the swaps is you have a lot of high damage AoE and sustain abilities in your mage form, as well as a massive damage buff which can only be activated in that form. You then switch into your melee form and complete your damage rotations, big AoE spinny attacks, and awakened abilities. She is she is fairly hard to play, and she might not be the best character for people who are just looking to sort of turn their brains off and grind. There are other classes in the game who can grind just as well and if not better with a lot less effort. However, if you're the type of person that likes to be a little bit more complex, a little more combo focused, and likes to actually put some brain power into your grinding, she could very well be the one for you. Or if you just like emos, she definitely has that down as well. Alright, it's time for us to talk about the Berserker. The man who starts off with 2 axes and then upgrades into a Mega Man arm cannon. If you're a fan of big, smashing Hulk style abilities, loads and loads of explosions, or just having your grinding rotations funded and directed by Michael Bay, the Berserker might be a character for you. He has really good grinding, some surprisingly good mobility, and he's just all around hilariously fun to play. He's okay in group PvP, but he is insane in 1v1s. If you are grinding somewhere, only idiots are going to try and come up and contest you. His 1v1 power comes from his amazing grab combos, where he can basically just chain grabs on you until you are dead, throw you into the air, grab your body, and throw it over the closest building, so you will never ever come back. One thing you should know though, guys, even though he is amazingly fun to play, great in 1v1s, and good at grinding, he is very tall. He is a giant, and while some people don't necessarily think that's a problem, he is kinda glitchy when it comes to being in small buildings and towns, especially if you start maxing out that height slider. Have you ever wanted to play as a cute Korean girl while simultaneously ripping apart every single monster in sight with a giant demon shadow wolf? If so, and why wouldn't you? The Tamer might be the class for you. She is a short sword using class who awakens into using a bow staff. She also has her pet wolf to come out and murder all the enemies with you. She has some surprisingly fantastic AoE damage and is fairly easy to grind with straight off the bat. Seriously guys, her AoE cannot be underestimated. People think that she is a summoner style pet focused class, but she actually is the main damage dealer between the pair of them. She also has a surprising amount of utility in player versus player, and if you've ever tried to duel one, you have probably been stun locked until your health bar hit 0. She is fairly well known for her ability to stun lock people in one-on-one confrontations, and is fairly strong in the groups as well. Alright, something that should be noted, guys, is you can actually ride her wolf later on. Now, while horses are always going to be better once you get later into the game, sometimes, a stray mob will come up and murder your horse, and you don't have a ride back to town. He actually does provide a free emergency mount, and also doesn't take fall damage, so you can jump off cliffs and take shortcuts that you normally wouldn't be able to take. One last thing, guys, she uses the short sword as I mentioned earlier. What's kind of cool about that is the ninja and Kunoichi both use the same sword, but are a little bit harder to grind with off the bat. So if you're thinking about making a ninja as an alt, maybe start off with the Tamer due to her easy grinding, grind yourself up a load of money and gear, and then you can transfer not just your armor, but your armor and weapon over to your ninja or Kuno. It's actually a really cool strategy I've seen some people use just due to her massive AoE right out of the gate. So if that sounds like something you would enjoy, why don't you give the Tamer a try? Alright guys, next up we are going to be talking about the Striker. Now the Striker in unawakened form uses all sorts of punches, kicks, and grabs in order to deal damage, but once he awakens he continues to use punches, kicks, and grabs. But this time you have clones of yourself also doing punches, kicks, and grabs. Now while it does sound boring, guys, I cannot stress the fact of how fun this class really is. He deals some surprisingly big AoE damage, loads and loads of mobility, but perhaps the most surprising thing about the Striker is just how damn tanky he is. Seriously guys, what you think is going to be a glass cannon style class actually ends up being one of the tankiest classes in the entire game. He's got loads of super armor, loads and loads of health. Seriously guys, he is very, very hard to kill. Now just because he is hard to kill does not mean that he is immobile like a lot of other tanks in games. He actually has crazy mobility, loads of leaps, dashes, fast abilities. This guy is a monster. Now he's actually both fantastic at PvE and PvP, and would be a great class for anyone just starting off the game. Now there is one thing I should mention, guys. He can feel a little clunky at times. I don't know if it's that his animations are a little bit too slow motion, or they have a little bit of input lag on them, but something about the Striker does make him feel a little clunky. Some people seem to be able to notice it and some people don't, but if you don't have any issues with it, you have an amazing class on your hands, and you will go very, very far in this game if you can learn all the combos. Alright, so next up we are going to be talking about the Blader classes Musa and Mae WA, starting off with the Musa. Now the Musa is an AoE focused grinding class that has one of the fastest speeds in the game due to his incredibly quick dashes and forward running abilities. He has some of the best pack-to-pack dashes in the entire game, and when you get him fully geared, is by far one of the fastest grinders in the game. He has crazy amounts of AoE auto attacks in a complete 360 helicopter motion, and can pretty much clear any pack from a standstill. Now one thing to mention about that though is because he has so much AoE, he is actually significantly lacking single target damage. So while he is fantastic at grinding out mobs, if you end up getting into a one-on-one duel, you probably are going to lose if the class has any sort of 1v1 potential whatsoever. You do a crazy amount of damage, but seeing as how it's all focused in a ring around you, you may want to look somewhere else if you're looking for a 1v1. Alright, so contrary to nearly everything I said about the Musa, we have his companion, the Mae WA, or if yours is really good looking, the Mae WA. Now Mae WA over here is a single target damage powerhouse. Instead of using the crescent blade that the Musa uses, she uses what's called a Kara Spear for crazy frontal cone single target damage abilities. She does have a little bit of AoE here and there to help her clear packs, but for the most part everything you have is going to be funneled forwards. Very sharp points of damage, very high combo potential, and extremely high single target damage make her one of the best duelists in the game. Now that does not mean that she is unable to grind, but if you are looking for a class purely for grinding, you are going to have to put a little bit more effort in if you want to use the Mae WA. The thing about her is because all of her main abilities are in a cone, you actually have to put effort into grouping up all the monsters tightly rather than just running in the pack and blowing your abilities. She requires a little bit more setup, but you can very easily pull it off with a little bit of practice, and she is just as fast as the Musa. So if you're able to pull it off, give it a try. She is a very fun class, but don't expect to be just helicoptering around and grinding mobs. You're going to have to put a little bit of effort in, but it could just very well pay off. Alright, next up guys, we're going to be talking about the two assassin classes, Ninja and Kunoichi, starting off with the Ninja. Now the Ninja is a class that uses a short sword as his main hand, but once awakened gets 6 katanas, although I think you only use 4 at a time. It's still pretty badass walking around with them. As you would expect from a ninja class, he is extremely fast, lots of little dashes, and has some crazy high single target burst. Now even though he is focused on his single target damage, he does still have a bit of high damage AoE abilities, just not really quite as much as some of the other classes. Now, what some people will tell you is that the ninja is bad at grinding, but don't actually take that to think that he has low damage. His AoEs and single target damage is extremely high, but where he really sort of lacks is in his pack-to-pack mobility. You don't really have any long-range dashes or movement abilities. You basically just have to walk in between them, which makes him fairly inefficient when it comes to grinding. Now, if you can find an area with a little bit closer packs, you can grind just as well as the best of them. However, where he lacks in grinding, he will make up for in his one-on-one. He is by far the best 1v1 class in the game, aside from maybe Berserker when both played perfectly, but he will just sneak up to you and he will completely gut you from start to finish with his crazy high burst damage. Now there is something worth talking about, which is his awakened form actually becomes a fairly slow heavy hitter. Some people expect him to be just as fast as his unawakened form, but he actually does kind of slow down, get not necessarily clunky, but he does get like a slow heavy hitting explosive style class, which you may not particularly be expecting. Alright, so on the other hand guys, we have the Kunoichi. While leveling up, she uses the same short sword that the ninja does, but once she awakens, she gets a chakram. And if you don't know what a chakram is, it's basically a razor-bladed hula hoop. Now, the Kunoichi does have a little bit less single target burst than the ninja does, but in order to compensate, she does come with a little bit more AoE, which means that she's a little bit worse at PvP than the ninja when both played at their highest level, but she is quite a bit better at PvE content. So if you're looking to play a assassin style class but you're basically only looking to grind, I would definitely recommend you pick the Kunoichi. However, if you are looking to PvP or roleplay and use costumes, all that type of thing, then I would just say pick whichever one you think looks cooler, because they're both good in general. A lot of people like to look down on the ninja classes, but honestly guys, they are both great classes. They are loads and loads of fun to play, but like I said, if you're looking to do grinding, maybe look at the Kunoichi first, and if you just want to play something really badass and PvP with them, then either one of them, it's up to you. Alright, so now guys, we're going to talk about the Dark Knight. Now the Dark Knight starts off while unawakened using a Kriegsmesser, which I'm pretty sure just stands for big ass sword. She eventually awakens to use the Vidiant, a glove which is controlling 2 telepathic swords which float around behind you. Now it is worth noting that she does go from a heavy melee class to a close to mid-range casting class, and you don't really go back to using the Kriegsmesser that much. Now that being said, she does have some massive AoE and single target damage, guys. She is amazingly good at grinding and fairly good at PvP, except she is a little squishy, so you gotta be kinda careful. She is also one of the fastest grinding classes in the game. Her pack-to-pack mobility is crazy fast. She has near 100% crit chance and some crazy damage AoEs, and on top of all of that, she is fairly easy to play. Although there is a lot of nuances, especially when it comes to her PvP. If you're just looking for someone to sort of start off with, she is a fantastic beginner character. And due to the fact that a lot of people play her, she is fairly easy to gear because a lot of people tend to be selling her gear on the marketplace. Now, one thing that people don't necessarily mention about her in these guides is just how damn cool her effects are. Like, I cannot state this enough, guys. Those neon pink and dark purple explosion effects, they are really, really cool to look at. Alright, so next up we're going to be talking about both the Witch and the Wizard, and we are going to be grouping them both into one category because they're fairly similar, but I will be talking about the differences between the two. So both classes start off using a staff while unawakened, and then when awakened they use some magical orbs to help cast their abilities. Now the wizard's elements tend to be fire and water based spells, while the witch uses more of earth and lightning abilities. Now, another slight difference between the two of them is that the wizard's AoE tends to be complete 360-degree AoEs, whereas the witch's abilities are a little bit more of a cone. But it's not quite to the extent of the Musa and Mae WA. She does have some very, very huge AoEs, just a little bit more cone focused than circle. Now on top of that, if you're a PvP kind of guy, it is very, very, very much worth noting that the wizard has a grab, whereas the witch has a block, making the wizard's playstyle a little bit more aggressive when it comes to his fighting, and the witch is a little bit more defensive. Now that being said, the wizard is also slightly easier, just because the witch requires a little bit better positioning and has slightly less mobility. However, both classes are absolutely fantastic for beginners, and you will not have a hard time getting to some endgame content with them. If you were to go on the Black Desert Reddit or forums at any point in the last year, you would probably have seen a whole storm of posts complaining about how broken the Mystic is. However, lately she has been hit by the nerf bat and is actually a fairly decent class now and not completely broken. Now the Mystic uses her punches and kicks similar to the Striker, but uses a lot more water-focused abilities rather than the fire-focused abilities of the Striker. On top of that, she is a lot more fluid than the Striker, as you would expect the water version to be. She is a little bit faster, and instead of big single heavy hitting abilities, she has more rapid fire, quick movements. On top of that, she has some of the craziest mobility in the entire game and some extremely good farming AoE. She is also a little bit less tanky, but she does deal more damage. If you're looking for a more glass cannon version of the Striker, it would be hard to go wrong with the Mystic. Now in PvP, she is well known for her near permanent super armor, making her very, very good against classes that rely on CC and can pretty much murder anyone. If you haven't been sold on the class yet, you should understand. You get to control a dragon, an entire dragon, just for you. If that doesn't sell you on the class, nothing will. Alright, last and very certainly not least, we have the Lawn. Now the Lawn uses a pendulum and sword while unawakened, but then when awakened gets the chain blades, very similar to Kratos from the God of War series. Her playstyle is a little bit weird to sum up because she's basically a ranged melee class. She uses swords and everything like you would expect from a melee class, but because of the chains she has very long range, stun lock combos from a distance, and all sorts of weird things like that, but she is extremely fun to play. Unfortunately, it is a little too early to tell how good she will be in PvE and PvP because she is fairly new and is still being buffed and nerfed in certain areas. I can't understate how fun she is to play, and if you really want a little bit more in-depth footage and a little bit more of my in-depth opinion on her, I am doing a video series on her over on my channel, where my opinion on her changes as the buffs and nerfs go through, you'll be able to see in real time over there. Alright guys, well that about sums it up. That is a overview of all the classes for you guys who are new to the game. Now if you want a little bit more in-depth views on all the classes that we mentioned here today, as well as any updates if a new class comes out, come on over, head into the Discord, and I have at least 100 people in the Discord who are willing to help you out. If you have any questions, either at me in the Discord or even leave a comment down below. The YouTube community for Black Desert is huge and people are always willing to help out. This game has one of the nicest and most helpful communities out there, and if you are just getting into the game, you are about to go on a wild ride. So once again, do not forget what I said at the beginning of the video. Play for fun, don't play to min-max, pick a character that you think you will enjoy, and just strap in, because it's going to be a long ride, but it's going to be a good one. Thanks for watching.